Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Tekken 10 with Sin. So today I'm doing a little overview of the Diamond Multimedia R9 270X. Now, this is one of Diamond's latest and greatest graphics cards. The 270X, 280X, and 290X, all part of the R9 series, were released in part to replace the 7000 series. So the 7900 series was supposed to be replaced by the R9 290X. The 280X is supposed to replace the 7800 series, and the 7700 series is supposed to be replaced by the 270X. Now, they're at the same price points. For instance, an R9 7790 costs about, I don't know, $180 down to like $130 right now, depending on what model you buy from what brand. This model, or the 270X, the reference designs, or the reference clocked ones, such as this one, which is stock clock for the 270, they cost anywhere from $200 up to like almost $300 for some of the super OC'd ones. Now, this one isn't going to cost you close to $300 at all. It's going to be closer to that $200 price point. And I actually looked online. I couldn't really find it in stock many places. Well, I couldn't find a lot of them in stock many places. They seem to be sold out because they're selling like hotcakes. But once I benchmarked this card, it was very evident to me why they were selling like hotcakes. Basically, these cards perform really well compared to the last generation, even though they use the same core. Like, I believe this core, you pronounce it Picarin or something like that. And that's also found in the 7800 series. So like a 7850, an HG 7850 would have the same GPU core as this. However, the 270X, 290X, 280X compared to their 7000 series cards are higher clocked. So this is running at faster speeds. It's a higher bin part. It also has more memory than some of the other equivalent parts. This cooler provided on is aftermarket, of course. You can tell because these screw holes right here are made for the stock standard reference cooler. However, as you can see, they're unpopulated. Instead, populated are the 4 screws around the GPU core. And those are the only screws that hold this cooler onto this PCB. Now, this is a really nice cooler. You can see 5 heat pipes that are nickel-plated with a copper vapor chamber on the inside. Here you can see the 5 pipe endings. Okay. Anyways, now let's take a look at the back panel. See, we have DVI here, and then we have HDMI as well as 2 display ports. Okay, so that's basically the exterior. In your case, you're going to have a view of the card such as this. So it's a little bluish PCB, dark blue, and then you see these 5 heat pipes protruding from it a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to undo this like I usually do. And it's actually pretty simple to undo, and I've done it before. So if you're going to replace the cooler on a GPU, you want to make sure to evenly release the screws because you don't want too much pressure on one side of the graphics core because the silicon is very fragile and can break. Anyway, so that's quite simple, is taking this off. And one more left. Okay, now that we remove that, you can see that there's some good contact between the core and the heatsink. Standard fan connector holds in the fan, and we can take a look at this heatsink a little bit more. Let me get behind the camera here. Alright. Slow twirl. Rear. And the front. Okay, you can see the heatsink is pretty staggered. It seems to be a very hefty design, and temperatures are actually pretty good as well. Overclocked, I don't go above the 70s. Anyways, so let's take a look at the GPU core as well as everything else on the board. So we're going to zoom in here like I do on my motherboard reviews. Anyways, this card features 2 GB of Elpida memory. Now, this memory is not actually the one on the AMD reference design. The AMD reference design uses Hynix memory, which seems to clock a little higher. But the Elpida isn't bad in its own right. It has its own benefits, and nothing to be ashamed of or anything like that. So, let's move over to some of the other components, right? So, we have a 5-phase voltage regulator here. Now, each one is run by one of these square components, and these are driver MOSFETs, okay? There's 5 of them here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, from Fairchild Semiconductor, their model is FDMF6705B. These are 40 amp driver MOS, which means the driver, the high side, and low side FET are integrated into one piece. Now, they can output about 40 amps, I would say around probably 80% efficiency at about 300 kilohertz switching frequency. You can see that there are some empty pads in the center there, and these pads, like here between these inductors, they're made for extra capacitors, but there's no reason they should be there right now, because there's something that some 270X owners don't know, and that's that some of these cards have no voltage control. AMD, I guess, asked them not to have voltage control, or asked the manufacturers not to make voltage control possible. I don't know why they did this, but it makes overclocking a little simpler, but also not as fun and challenging. So while you can't change the voltage, all you can do is cool down the GPU core more to get higher clocks. And while that might be easier to do, you're not going to get as high clocks as if you could increase the voltage. But perhaps there's another issue we don't know of. Maybe there's an issue with raising the voltage on the cores of these GPUs. Who knows? Anyways, we have some inductors here, 5, and you can see this is kind of weird designed voltage regulator. In the center here is what you would consider the switching node, and that's where all the power goes to, the center. So it comes from here and goes inside, and there it goes inside, and the power goes through the center and goes to the GPU. Now, I don't really know why they did that instead of just lining it up straight like the reference design is, or how other designs are, but there are other 270Xs out there with this same voltage regulator design. Maybe it's to facilitate the cooling method, so the heatsink can fit perfectly. Who knows? Anyways, moving along, we can move along here, and we have 2 other voltage regulators, one here and one here. This voltage regulator is for the memory right here, and it's controlled by a little AWP PWM controller from Ampec. And there's another single-phase AWP PWM here, and it controls the single-phase for the VPLL. Now, there is a Chill PWM, a digital PWM from Chill, now known as IR, or International Rectifier, right here. I believe that model number is a CHL8225G. It's a 5-phase pulse-width modulator. Now, you can do 4+1 or whatever like that, or just 5 phases altogether, and that's what it's doing, just 5 phases here. It is fully digital, has I2C control, so most any software, like even MSI Afterburner, should be able to control the voltage on this, except AMD has it locked down through the BIOS. Talking about the BIOS, on the back here are the BIOS, as well as a few linear regulators in this area. Now, GPUs aren't that sophisticated in terms of exterior design of the PCB implementation, mostly because, I mean, most everything is integrated into the GPU, and it's its own little computer, you know. So, yeah, all you got on your graphics card is your voltage regulators, some memory, and the GPU core, which integrates a lot of features into it, a lot of functionality. Alright, thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Thanks.